and emotional wellness coach. And so today I'm going to be talking with you about what you need to know about panic attacks. And I like this subject. The panic attacks are not fun to have, but they're really fun to work with therapeutically because you can resolve them so quickly. And so we're going to talk about that a bit today. But I wanted to talk about this because um, panic attacks are real, man, and they sneak up on you whenever. However, they're not something that you can really plan for. And I'm going to during this time I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, why and how the brain is working with this. So and why this is happening, because once you understand a little bit more about why it's happening, then you are more capable to resolve the issue. And the sooner you resolve the issue, the more you get your emotional freedom back. Because once you start having panic attacks, or even if you just have one or you've had them before, they can be so painful. Like your body teaches you. Oh, my internet is kind of slow. I don't know if it's over there on you guys, but I hope you can get this. If not, post in the thing so I can turn it off and start over in the beginning and not in the end, because that would be sad. Um, but if you they can panic attacks can happen very randomly. They can happen consistently. You can know exactly what causes your panic attacks, and you can not know at all. And so that's really frustrating when you have them, and you can really feel like you want to avoid that at all costs, because your brain pretty much tells you that all of a sudden you're being chased and confronted with a lion or a tiger, and you've got to panic fast. But in reality, there is no lion or tiger trying to eat you, right? And so it's hard to explain to the people around you. My nervous system is going into panic mode, and that's why I look like this right now, or that's why I can't talk. Sometimes, it doesn't. It's a very quiet thing. Sometimes people around you don't know you're having a panic attack. Sometimes you don't know you're having a panic attack, and but it's a panic attack nonetheless. Um, so yeah, and if you have lots of panic attacks, you know what I'm talking about. You are an expert at this, so feel free to make comments below, ask questions, and I will answer them. Even if you get this on the replay, you can still post questions or comments, and I will respond to those. So I thought what would be good is to read what the DSM-5 says. Got a handy dandy one of those in front of me right now, and I'm going to read that a little bit to you, and then we'll dive off, because this is a book, and when you practice enough and you see enough, plus I've also had panic attacks myself over stuff that I'll talk about that later here, but you don't always think about it like this. So we'll talk about both ways. Okay, so I'm just going to read this and we'll get started. A panic attack is a reoccurring, unexpected panic attack. It's an abrupt surge of intense fear or intense discomfort that reaches a peak within minutes, and during which time 4 or more of the following symptoms occur. Okay, so according to DSM, you got to have 4 of these symptoms to qualify for a panic attack. Palpitations, which is pounding in your heart, or pounding heart, accelerated heart rate, sweating, trembling, or shaking, sensations of shortness of breath or smothering. That happens a lot. That happens so much more than people realize. So, feelings of choking, that your throat gets so tight that you feel like you're choking or you can't swallow, chest pain or discomfort, nausea or abdominal distress, feeling dizzy, unsteady, lightheaded or faint, chills or heat sensations. Some word I have no idea how to pronounce, but it's the numbness or tingling sensations, maybe sometimes in your face, in your arms, your legs, anywhere, really doesn't matter. Derealizations of feeling that this isn't real. Or depersonalization, feeling detached from yourself. Maybe you feel foggy or fuzzy, or that you're looking outside of yourself. Fear of losing control or going crazy, and fear of dying. So if those things surge upon you at any time, you've got yourself a panic attack. And none of those symptoms sounds exciting. None of them sounds very good. And people want to avoid them at all costs because they are so horrible. You can feel like you're dying, um, or you can feel like you're being physically altered in a way, right? And if you don't know why that's happening, if you don't know what the trigger is, it really can feel double mysterious because of what's wrong with me, what's happening to me. Why have I lost complete control of my body? And you have. Um, and so that's a panic attack. So, you know, when I'm talking about panic attacks, I because I like people to look out for these things because we're looking for symptoms to eliminate. And if you don't know you've got a panic attack, well, we can't eliminate it, right? Until it shows itself, right? So, but I tell people that panic attacks could be really hot. They can give you that heat sensations, like you're on fire and you just got to move around and try to cool yourself off. But just the idea of hot panic attacks, or sometimes the panic attacks are really cool, like frozen cool, like you're just frozen in place and it's kind of a quiet thing, but it's intense and your body's frozen, and that's your brain shifting you into freeze mode. Um, there are panic attacks where you are running, you are trying to figure out how to make this thing stop. You might be crying, you might be holding on to a loved one frantically. I have a loved one who was actually arrested because the police thought that they were resisting arrest, but really they were having a panic attack. They were released quickly, but how horrible, right? Some people's are, so there's so many different ways, and those are just a couple of the ones that I want to bring up, and if as they come to my mind, I'll share a little bit more. But it's strange because they are caused by something. These things aren't just happening for no reason. And what's going on here on the brain level is that how our bodies and brain work. Okay, our body is sending our brain signals all the time, and so our brain and our survival center is getting all of that information first. Everything that we see, all the things that we hear, things that we taste, the things that we're smelling, tactile sensations, the coolness in the air, fog in the air, heat in the air. It's receiving all this information. And your survival center is determining at all times, is this safe? Is this not safe? Am I in danger? Am I not in danger? It's doing this all the time for every single person. But if you've got an anxiety, depression, or trauma disorder, it's deciding all the time, I'm in danger, and you're not. But it's making those decisions because of how the brain works. And I have a lot of other videos that talk about that. So if I don't get into that piece further, I just want you to know you can go look for that. But let's see. So your survival center is getting all that information, right? So any one of those senses that your body is picking up could be something that your brain has already flagged as dangerous. Okay, so that means that it could be a smell, it could be a sight, it could be fog, it could be mist, it could be cold, it could be hot. I've got a client who has a lot of panic attacks when it's hot because it reminds her of the abuse that she experienced, and in her house as a child, and her house was always hot, and so the heat really is a trigger for her. I've got other clients that one starts having panic attacks if there's the right combination of the right temperature and like shower stuff, right? So mist, that kind of stuff, sends them right off. There's different words that could be said. I have a client that will have a panic attack. She hasn't had one for this in a while, but her trigger was the phrase, "What are you talking about?" Because of a hallucinogenic experience they had. And just that one phrase would send them off. I was struggling one time at a job where I did not want to be on this particular floor. I was a social worker in the hospital. I did not want to be on this floor because I had issues with this particular issue. And when I was working there, I was really struggling. But Um, I started to I would read charts, and if I'd see a word like thyroid, I just go into a straight panic attack. Any body parts, I would just, or organs, I would just go into a panic attack. And it took me a while to be like, this is a panic attack, Rachel. And I was like, oh, I should do something about this. And I did. And so I was able to stop having them, and I was able to really work effectively there because I had started building up a lot of anxiety about being there. And it's interesting because I that was about 6 years ago, and I had really not used my tools for quite a while. I used my tools obsessively and compulsively. Um, when I first was diagnosed with anxiety, with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I used them a lot, and I was able to move my anxiety disorder into remission in about 3 years or so. It took me a little bit longer to do my trauma because I just really didn't know how to put it all together quickly. And once you're suffering, if you feel a little bit better, man, that's good. You don't even think about keep working. You're just like, this is great. Um, but if there had been years in between when I needed my like the tools that I had developed and the strategies and stuff that I had developed and that job, there had been years, and so I hadn't really been using them, and so I was having like my second, third panic attack, and I was like, this is a panic attack, and I was like, you should do your things. And so I really was able to, and I was able to work through a lot of the anxiety. I ended up really having a great time on that floor after I worked through that anxiety that was really strangling me. So panic attacks they come from just so much of our senses, and once that survival center decides that this is dangerous, it goes into survival mode, into panic mode, and that means it goes straight into, and this happens like a switch, like a light is switched, because our brains are electrical, and that part of the brain is the fastest. That's the part of the brain that if you grab a hot pot, it makes you drop it without thinking about it, and it happens fast. It's a reactive thing. And once that part of the brain decides that that's dangerous, you're off. And you don't get to calm down from your panic attack or any of the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and traumatic stress until that survival center decides that it's safe now, because it takes the controls of all your brain. It takes all the controls from you. And so you don't get to choose. If you're panicking, you don't get to say, hey, heart, slow down now. You don't get to say, hey, tingling, go ahead and stop. You don't get to do any of those things. You just have to wait for your survival center to decide that things are safe. And really, that's where the work is. That's one of the pieces where the work is, because sometimes it's hard to get in there when you're having a panic attack because it's hard to think, right? So there's a lot of other strategies as well, but you really want to get in there and help your brain make the interpretation that I am safe. We have lots of strategies for this. Some of them are helpful, but most of them are all effective. Eating will help a panic attack, right? That's why people have binge eating disorders, and that's why they have emotional eating, is because they're working through a panic attack. They don't know that. They think they're just lazy. They think they're out of control. They think they have all these problems. No, you're having a panic attack, and you need it to stop. And shove some food in there and you'll be fine. This is why we use marijuana. And I'm not talking about the recreational kind because I don't have any problems or judgment with that whatsoever. I'm talking about the daily use of it, the use of it to help your brain regulate. A lot of times we're using that because it'll work very quick to shift us out of a panic attack. And if you're in a very painful place, that really can get things moving for you out of that place. Alcohol, sex. It's hard to have sex while you're having a panic attack, just a thought. But those things all affect the body because the survival center doesn't care about what you know. It doesn't care what you think about. It doesn't care what you believe. It doesn't care what the plan was. It cares about your body. And so that's why all the interventions that work the best to create change with how your survival center makes these interpretations are strategies that use the body. And so I have to turn the heat off. Excuse me. That was just too much to deal with. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? Yeah, and there's a lot that, so yes, that the interventions that work best to create lasting change in the brain for the interpretation, is this safe or is this dangerous, have to do with the body, because that's the only thing your that part of the brain cares about. That's why it's not a choice. That's why it's not this information, the shower stuff, the sounds you're hearing, the tastes you're having. Those aren't that information doesn't even get to your thinking center. But when you can get the information into your thinking center, that's the part of the brain that heals all of these problems. The problem is the survival center will block it from getting all the way into your healing center, and it will block it for a lifetime. This is not something you want to wait to make sure, like, okay, we'll just wait it out. I'll just wait until these panic attacks stop. I'll just wait. Maybe it'll get better with time. Your survival center is dedicated to you for a lifetime. If there is something that it has decided is not safe, is dangerous, it's going to decide that for a lifetime. And that's why these interventions that we have now that work with the body, um, they help move. There's so many ways to describe what it does, but I'm going to tell you from a philosophical, or maybe I'm going to tell you the not scientific way, okay? But what it does is these interventions actually move the survival center out of the way. That's one way to put it, okay? It moves it out of the way, and so that the material, the information, can actually get into your thinking center, okay? And so these interventions kind of help soothe that, or calm that, so that the healing center can do the work, and it does it fast, it does it quickly. And that once that part gets it, that part examines all the materials, like, oh, is this really dangerous, is this not, what should we do with this, blah blah blah. It does what it does. I don't know all the things it does up there, I just like to watch it happen. And then it says, well, we need to make some changes, and it will make changes to your survival center and the program the survival center is operating on. And so that way, the interpretation that it was making with this information, it doesn't make that anymore. And that's how we can get panic attacks to actually stop. Okay. And and I really want you to have that expectation, because a lot of us just expect us to keep having this forever. And yes, that was the real deal. And if you're going to use talk therapy, you're probably going to have panic attacks forever. You're going to be talking about panic attacks forever. So I don't suggest that. Talk to your talk therapist for support, to vent with, to talk with, to learn from, but don't talk to your talk therapist to stop your panic attacks. Okay, that you can't talk your way through that, because the survival center does not care, right? It doesn't care. You could talk all day long. It's like, no, I don't think so. Go ahead, keep talking about it if you want to, but I've already decided. And yeah, go ahead, make your plans. This is how I do things. And then you're stuck in that same pattern. Okay, so another way to look at this is you have all this material that I'm not going to go there. One example is enough. But I will tell you that I've had somebody come to me specifically for a panic attack. They came to me one time. We worked on the panic attack. I called them a couple months later because I didn't hear from them. And at that time, I was just starting my practice. And my thing was, when I told them, I said, hang out for as long as you need to. When you don't need it anymore, go on about your business, because that's what life is supposed to be done. It's supposed to be lived, right? And I didn't know that there were all these other things I should be doing, like helping people work through their subconscious programming, healing more emotional wounds, those sorts of things. But I called her a couple months later and I asked about that panic attack. She was like, oh yeah, no, that's done. I haven't had a panic attack since. And that is a realistic outcome, because once that brain does it, it's done. I've had another one. I had a client who was a gentleman who had erectile dysfunction, and amazing human, awesome individual. And we went to go find this, because some of this, you don't have to, okay? But one of the fastest ways and deepest ways to resolve this is to go to the origin and of the problem, where it began. It's only one. That's one way to resolve this. So you really don't have to. but you can go to the origin of the challenge and help the brain process that. And once it gets that event through the healing pathways, then after it's done, it upgrades the system, and then it changes the interpretation that your survival center is making. There we go. Okay, so that. And so we went to, there was a sexual abuse situation. And so we tried to resolve that there, and it wouldn't resolve. And as a matter of fact, they would freeze, right? Their panic response was freeze. That was one of the major ones. And it was the most interesting thing I've ever seen, because he would seriously not move. And I know we found the trigger when he would not move. And so, and I expected it to resolve, didn't resolve. So we worked back out of that, and then really went back in again. We spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out where the trigger was. And we ended up doing a lot of the subconscious programming along the way. But we finally found it in a memory when they were 3 and they experienced a domestic violence situation, and they were hiding in the closet with their mom. And that was the beginning of this freeze situation. And we ended up using some resourcing in there. That's a strategy where you, when you can't resolve something yourself, like, it's a strategy that's used in therapy. It's the same thing we use at work or something. If we have a problem, we don't really know what we're looking for. And so what resources can I use? Oh, let me go talk to my boss. And we go do that. And so we're talking with our boss, and our boss just says one little thing, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, yes, that's it. And we get back to work, and we're like, it's running, and then we finish our project and whatever. We can do the same thing in therapy as well. It's a strategy that you can absolutely learn. I teach this to all my clients because it's wonderful. And it's a great way to support your brain and to really hack into a lot of resources, which is one of the reasons why traumas don't resolve, is because we don't have the resources in the moment. We don't have a parent that will help us figure out what the heck happened, or we don't have somebody to protect us, or we don't have someone to make it stop, or we don't, and so sometimes, we're at adulthood and we're still like, I don't know how to make it stop. And that's when it's a really great time to pull in a resource. So we ended up going there, and I knew we got it the second he froze up, and all of a sudden he was like, and it was like, yes. And then we went forward, and then it was resolved. And I can't tell you how awesome it is to, because I don't know, but I can only imagine how awesome it is to not have panic attacks, all day long that result in erectile dysfunction, and to be able to use all your parts effectively, because it's hard to get your blood moving in one direction when your body is panicking. And when panic, our body sends our blood into our extremities to fight, and you don't need any extra parts to fight, so you don't get any blood there, and you need that to be able to have a proper erection. So now everything was restored, and awesome story. He's a phenomenal guy. But over and over like that, right? I've had other clients that come in, the most severely traumatized human I've worked with was having panic attacks 5 times a day. And that was just intense. We ended up not even going after the panic attacks directly in the beginning, because there was so much outer work to do. And I was just speaking with them recently, and they're only having one once in a while, and they were able to get a new job. They got a promotion. All these things because of just how resolving that those panic attacks just increases our function, right? And I look forward to hearing from them. They moved away. I don't like it when that happens. I do like it when that happens. Same thing with another client of mine. They were their panic attacks were, they would have them in the middle of interviews, and you can imagine how bad that is. And they were not getting a job. And finally, after working with me for a couple of months, I should figure out how many months. That was really cool. After working with me for a couple of months, they were finally able to make it through an interview without getting a panic attack. And they got like this professor position at this big fat college. It was awesome. We were celebrating by text. And just so much freedom we can have when we can resolve these panic attacks. And guess what? You can do this for yourself. You're going to need guidance. You're going to need some training. And, or, I want you to know this is available because I want you to go find it. Now, there's a chance you could, without any training, find it at all. But, I think that that inner world stuff can be really tricky. And especially the more traumatized you are, the more important it is that you have support. If you don't have a big trauma history and you want to try some things out, go for it. But I would encourage you to get professional help, because it's you want to do this and you want to do it well, and you want to be as stable as possible while you do it. Trauma work can really be destabilizing. You can really lose control of your body and your functioning, because if your survival center decides that it's not safe, you can't reason with it. It just puts you in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And, panic attacks can last for a while, but really that state of fight, flight, freeze, or faint, those survival states can last a really long time. I had a client tell me after, who was that? Oh, yeah. I had a client tell me after a session recently. I've seen him, we're doing therapy, so we're doing the slow route. And I've seen him for like every other week for a couple of months. And we got through something really big. And they told me that they feel like maybe they've been in that survival state, or maybe even dissociated since they were little. And so that's kind of fascinating for me. I have not had somebody tell me that in those specific words before. So it's got me all like, I wonder what other therapists and researchers are finding out about that, because I wouldn't be surprised. I have a memory of myself. When I look back, I kind of feel like there were some memories of myself where I was just like shell shocked for a really long time. And as I've done inner child work on myself, that's how I've gone back and found my inner child, like standing there, like frozen, like overwhelmed, And so perhaps those are how our parts we carry our parts along with us in life. And one of the reasons why we don't function optimally, or perhaps a part of us is stuck in a survival state, or a state of overwhelm or disassociation, right? So, but whatever the deal is, these things are resolvable because your brain is. I was having this conversation with one of my loved ones who's done a lot of healing work and has had a lot of transformation this last year, and the comment that they made, which anyway, loved ones. But the comment that they made was just like, my brain was ready to heal this the whole time. I just didn't know how to do it. And now that I know how to do it, it's happening, and because they were a close loved one with me, to me, we did some work together, but really I had to really find them a trauma therapist that would do this work, do EMDR, but it was wonderful. So he did a lot of work there, but just so much at home. And it's really cool because no matter how much trauma we have, our brains really can heal it. Like, our brains are trauma healing experts. They're phenomenal. And when you figure out how to work with the brain in such a way to get that survival center to reprogram, fog doesn't have to mean danger anymore. That phrase doesn't need to mean danger anymore. That word thyroid doesn't need to equal danger to that center anymore. And so that's how you can really get those to stop. Okay, so I want you to know that. I want you to go after your healing. I want you, and let me tell you what, if you've got panic attacks, you've probably got some other things going on, and you would probably benefit from a pretty good overhaul. And so just know that, and there's really some really wonderful ways to make those overhauls happen quickly. And I know, because that's what I'm about, is that I like to do things as fast as possible. You have to keep with the rhythm of things, right? You can't go too fast, but I sure as heck don't want to go too slow, because there's life to live and we want the brain functioning as optimally as possible. So, but I will tell you that you can't resolve it without doing the work, and get it going now, because the more time you wait, the more time you suffer, and the more time that you don't have any power or control over the situation. And the more, it can be so embarrassing and just frustrating and overwhelming to have panic attacks spring up on you and anytime and any place. And so really work through that. And if this is something you want to talk with me about and see if I can help you resolve these issues quickly and with deep lasting transformation, go ahead and schedule a call with me. I'll spend an hour with you. I will be honest with you whether I can help you or not, whether we're the right fit or not, and we'll take a look and create a plan for you. So you can do that by getting on my calendar by going to rachelmcleod.com/call, and that will take you to my calendar page, and you can book the time that works best for you. And let's see. So I have time for a couple questions, but I'm not seeing any at the moment. So I'm going to take a moment and put that in there in case anybody is ready for that. And give you guys some time to think of a question. Okay. What do you think? Have you had a panic attack? I've had people in my group coaching program be like, so this is what happened recently, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a panic attack. Does that sound, have you ever had one before, and stuff like that? And then, and then we work through that and resolve that. But people just never thought that they were somebody that would have a panic attack. And so anyway, have you had a panic attack? Have you ever thought that you could eliminate them? Have you ever thought that you could be free of them? Have you ever thought that you could get back healthy function of your brain, to have your brain make accurate interpretations so that you're not having to panic in these moments where there's nothing to panic about? Right? Our system was designed to panic for our survival. If you didn't have a panic button, you're probably eliminated in the first couple of rounds of human life, because, you cannot pet the kitties in the jungle. If you're not afraid of them, if you're not moving, if you're not ready to fight, flight, freeze, or faint, you could really, your DNA will be eliminated. And so it's here for a very important reason, and we want it to function accurately. We want to panic when it's time to panic. But if you're panicking at times where it's not time to panic, gosh, how exhausting. I mean, your system is going into it's basically dumping all of its resources in that moment into your survival. And you don't even need to, you're not even in a survival moment. That's happening several times a day. How exhausting is that? How draining is that? Right? So imagine how much time and energy and health you would get back if you could just stop that one symptom. Imagine how many how many less trips you would take to the hospital or to the doctors, right? Because we go to the ER for these things. Lots of us are going to the ER for panic attacks because we think we're dying. Our heart is beating so hard and so fast for what reason we don't know, and it can feel like a heart attack. It can feel like you said it, like I said, choking, or like you're suffocating. I had I have one client who was suffocating all the time, and nobody ever asked. And they just thought that they were just doing these obsessions and compulsions, but they weren't. They weren't doing obsessive. They were doing the obsessions and compulsions because they needed to not suffocate. If they wouldn't do them, they would feel like they were suffocating and panicking. Jody Thomas asks, is there a difference between anxiety and panic attacks? And, I think, I'm going to tell you from my perspective that to me, I just look at it as brain function, and I look at that as your survival center has decided that something's dangerous. Even if you're worrying about something, you're worrying about something because it's dangerous. I mean, your survival center doesn't know. It's very dramatic in there because it's not a thinking center. It's just, is this safe, or is our survival at stake? Or is the survival of one of our loved ones at stake, right? And so, and if it's if it's anxiety and worry, that's part of that survival center having a problem there. And also, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking center, the one that wants to get in there and do the healing work, it wants to think about all these things. It's getting thrown off by your survival center, and it gets back in there and it's thrown off. It gets back in there and it's thrown off, and so it's cycling around and around and around. And so, um, so, but technically, yeah, there is a difference between a panic attack and an anxiety attack. An anxiety attack would be probably any of those symptoms without four of them present at the same time, right? Because you can be anxious and your heart's pounding, right? You can be anxious and have racing thoughts, um, or you can have tingling in your arms and your legs. I get that a lot when I'm doing EMDR. That's interesting. I find that fascinating. You'll hit a point in memories where um, they bring up the body sensation, and you work through that and resolve and clear the body sensation. And sometimes some of that is tingling or heaviness in the arms. It's really fascinating because those are actually symptoms of anxiety, panic attacks, depression, the heaviness, where your body feels like a weight. It's weighted, like your arms feel like 100 pounds each. That's part of your survival system and your neurological function. Your brain can do that to you. And so, so yes, there is a difference between anxiety and panic attacks. But I treat them the exact same way because they are just a misfunction of how the brain is functioning, and we just support the brain to heal and to reconsider how it's functioning, and then all of a sudden it really does function differently. It really changes that. I have a client who has had so much anxiety that at work they've been really aggressive, really irritable. They've been throwing fits, but one of the biggest challenges they have is they can't read. They just get so anxious that all the words start to blur, and so that could create a panic attack very quickly. Like, what's going on with me? What's wrong with me? Why? And so I would term panic attacks as elevated anxiety, and kind of a nice horrible storm of anxiety. And so it's in the same family. The brain is functioning, is misfiring in the same way. It's just um, it's we've got it worked out so that it's classifiable as four or more symptoms at the same time. And so that's a really fine line, but I think that's a great question. I think if you're having anxiety and panic attacks, the underlying root issue there is fear, right? So and that's why that's another reason why it's your brain is not managing fear properly, and it's malfunctioning in the face of fear, which it doesn't have to. Our brains don't have to malfunction in the face of fear. We can help our brains not malfunction in the face of fear, and we can help our brains at any time when we have the right tools and strategies to process fear quickly and keep it moving. And so yes, those are in the same family, but yes, they are different. And so, and I think while we're differentiating here, um, panic is a human emotion. We can feel panicked about a lot of things. This is something that I really look for with emotional eating. There's a lot of panic triggers around there, and people don't know they're panicking. They just think they're eating, and you're not. You're in a survival state, and you're eating because you need to get out of it. There's panic in our relationships, right? We will start to panic if we feel like if we confront an issue, if we make waves, if we rock the boat, we could lose everything. That we could end a relationship that's important to us, and we can panic about those sorts of things. So panic is a normal human emotion, but it's not something that we don't want to let it drive the boat, right? We don't want to let it drive our interactions. We want to receive the information. Okay, the information is that this person is important to me, right? And this is a fragile situation. It's not true that confronting the issue I'm not going to say that because there's your situation, but typically it's not true that the panic is it's just our bodies are receiving all kinds of signals, and our emotions are part of our navigation system. It's just like being in a I imagine this is also not technical, but I imagine it's like being in a cockpit of a plane, and there's all these lights and buttons, and a lot of those are your emotions, and they tell you what to do with things, and they help you fly your plane and get it going and navigate your relationships and whatnot. But especially if you're younger and nobody talked with you about this, or you were afraid, or you were crying and people said, no, don't cry, or why are you crying, you're not supposed to be crying, like you learned crying is bad instead of crying was actually doing some function, that it would have been good if you would have learned what that function was so that you could learn how to fly your plane, right? Or drive your car, whatever. Or they tell you not to be sad, stop being such a crab, you know? And so, but really, there was an underlying issue there that needed to be resolved so that you could move on. But instead, it was when you were sad, they said you were a crab. So now your sadness is linked with crabbiness, and you're not getting clear information anymore, right? And so that's a lot of, I don't know how I got on that. Oh, panic and emotions. Okay, okay, panic and emotions. It's an emotion, so it's just one to understand and be able to work with. We really need to work with all of our emotions. The more emotional intelligence we have, the more that high emotional intelligence correlates with high success, success of relationships, success with jobs, success with so many things. And so it's really a valuable thing to invest in and to grow in. And yeah, it's a door opener. So, and there's a lot that I think why I got back there was I was talking about um, wiring, how our brain is wired when we're kids. And yeah, so sometimes we got to untangle that wiring so we can get clear communications. Because if you're trying to press the on button and it's actually like panic button, you think you're pressing the on button and you're like, why is the system doing this? Why are all the buttons flashing? And really, you pressed the panic button, but it was mislabeled because that's what happened in your childhood. So that's all I got for today. Are there any questions? Any further questions before I get off? Okay, well, I'm going to see you all around. I'll see you another time. Take care.